NFL free agency is not over, but it's starting to slow down, which allows us to cross the bridge to the NFL draft. That's Dionne Miller of ABC7. I'm Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune. We've got a lot to talk about with the Chicago Bears and this busy offseason. But before we dig into kind of their needs and where people sort of are hunching that the compass is pointed for the draft in late April, I wanted to ask you about this because the trade went down on March 10th and the Bears gave up the number 1 pick, traded it to Carolina, and essentially took themselves out of the mix for any possible conversation or chatter or whatever it may be about the quarterback class of 2023. Now, through experience, I've learned that you always have to view a team through the things that they had an opportunity to do versus the things that they did do. And so by taking themselves out of the mix for the quarterbacks, you are removing the opportunity that they had, that they earned by losing 14 games to pick number 1 overall with the chance to swing at Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, potentially Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. And my question to you as we have this conversation today is, by removing yourselves from that sort of quarterback race or whatever you want to call it, are the Bears actually shortchanging themselves on the homework that they would have otherwise done if they still owned the number 1 pick and they were remaining open-minded to being blown away by one of these quarterbacks because they said they would be open to being blown away by one of these quarterbacks?
I don't think so. I think that I immediately think if Caleb Williams was in this draft class, I think we would feel differently. And the Bears have set themselves up to possibly, if things go absolutely like crazy with Justin, that they've set themselves up for that next year. Now, I do believe that other quarterback from Ohio State, CJ Stroud, is going to be really good no matter where he ends up. And I think he's going to transition to the NFL really nicely. And so, but the Bears don't need that, I guess. I don't know that they did that prematurely. I really don't. And they probably didn't. I have a feeling that Ryan did his homework before making that decision and knew that was not just like we believe in Justin, but also neither of these guys are going to blow me away.
Right. I get it. And I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. I think it's just a tricky place to be in where you think that you have your long-term answer at quarterback, but you don't know. And you have the luxury you had the luxury of having that number 1 pick to really dig in and say, okay, do we want to put Bryce Young through a private workout? Do we want to have him into our building for a full day at Hallis Hall and learn more about what makes him tick and how he's going to potentially overcome the size deficiencies that everyone points out there? Do we want to make sure that we complete this entire evaluation process so that we don't get 5 years down the road and Bryce Young is a star for the Carolina Panthers and you're rebooting for a 3rd time at quarterback and you're just thinking, man, there's a lot of regret there. Again, I don't have strong feelings.
You're repeating what happened with Mitch Trubisky. Like what you just said is the reason Bears fans are afraid when they make a decision like this, right? Like Patrick Mahomes, hello, you don't, and like you just said, like doing your homework, we feel like maybe they didn't in 2017 when they took Mitch before they talked to Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, which I think they dodged a bullet there. But at the same time, like, I mean, he was right there, right? And that's right. The fear. That's the fear that Bears fans have. And that's also what that front office has to think. We don't want to look 5 years down the road and realize that we should have kept that pick and moved in a different direction. I mean, that's the fear. No one wants to relive what the Bears have, that every time they see Patrick Mahomes on the biggest stage in the game, they think about the fact that, wow, that could have been ours.
And I bring this up just so that if I bring this up in 2028, people don't go, oh, it's revisionist history. I'll say, no, look right here. Late March 2023, Dionne Miller and I talked about this very topic on whether Bryce Young and CJ Stroud were worth a longer evaluation for the Bears. So be it. Obviously, we've talked for a long time that you and I are both on the same page as most people in Chicago are, that they need to see it through with Justin. They need to give him the opportunity to succeed, and we'll see where he goes. As we talked about in our last video, so much of 2023 and beyond hinges on where Justin goes. So the next part of this process is figuring out what the Bears do at number 9. And the latest mock draft from ESPN's Mel Kiper has them taking another Ohio State player, Paris Johnson, the offensive tackle there. Mel's mock draft this week included the choice there at number 9 between Paris Johnson and Peter Skoronski. That's a debate that folks in the NFL are having here, where you see Paris Johnson as the more prototypical NFL offensive tackle, perhaps slots on the right side most comfortably. And Skoronski is a guy who's obviously had great tape in college, playing against great competition at Northwestern, but has shorter arms than most people want in the NFL. And so then you have to make that sort of hard, really difficult decision that NFL general managers have to make in, are we doing ourselves a disservice by taking a guy that might have to bump inside to guard if he doesn't work out at tackle? And it's a bit more of a dice roll. It's a complicated journey there, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on those tackles, and if there's anybody else that's catching your eye as we work toward late April.
I mean, those are the top two. And you know how I feel about my Ohio State Buckeyes.
Yes.
But I would go Peter Skoronski. I really would. I mean, I just feel like he's right here in their backyard. He has some connection to the city, NFL bloodlines. I like him. And when he stands out on a field, obviously Northwestern is not your high level competitor in the Big Ten. We all know this, right? But he was talked about, coming through. It's not like he was like a flash in the pan, right? He was talked about the whole time during his career with the Wildcats. And that's just the direction that I would go. I feel like he'd be a good fit. I feel like he'd have more of an emotional attachment already to being in this city and wanting to stay close to his Evanston family. And feeling like this is, and right. And also that, well, he's practically my neighbor, Dan.
Right.
So I feel like that the Bears seem to be big on this, right? Like this whole like hometown kind of, they like to bring guys here that have that connection. To me, he makes sense on a lot of levels. He makes a lot of sense. So
before we transition, I've had this conversation with David Haw on our Take the North podcast about all these homegrown kids. We had 3 of them last year, at least. We had Jack Sanborn and Michael Schofield, and now Micah Duke Treadway was here during the preseason, and you've had all these guys that the Bears like. I asked David, like, is this actually a box? Not necessarily that they want on their checklist, but they actually star when they find a local guy who wants to play for the team, because obviously they've added TJ Edwards here, and they've spoke very, very highly about that. They've added Robert Tonyan now, a guy who's got Brian Urlacher memorabilia in his basement still, even during his time as a Green Bay Packer. And so I'm just curious, is there a type, I guess, for Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus, and an attraction to guys who are homegrown in Chicago and love the Bears to their core because they grew up rooting for them?
Well, of course. I mean, that has to play a small role in that, because if you grow up as a kid dreaming, like putting on that jersey and pretending that you play for the Bears, and then it becomes real, I mean, that has to, like, goosebumps for you, for your family. I mean, just what that feels like to know that your family is right here in this city and how much pride they have. And be like, no, he plays for the Bears, like our team, and win or lose or however bad they've been. The founding member of the NFL, like we've said so many times, it's better for the league when the Bears are relevant and winning, right? And so if you have a child that grew up cheering for them and now you get to cheer for them on this team, there can't be anything better as a parent to see your kid thriving right there in your hometown. There can't be. And I think if we talk so much about the psychology of sports, but you put someone in their hometown to play at the highest level, I think that can lend itself to success.
That prove it gene comes out. To be clear, I think probably at Hallis Hall, they've got 25 things on their checklist above grew up in Illinois, rooted for Bears. Because remember, Peter Skoronski grew up rooting for the Packers because of bloodlines, right?
Right.
And his grandfather's place in that organization. But certainly interesting that there's been sort of this infusion the last 2 years of those guys into that building over there. So one more player I wanted to ask you about, just because you bring up the Ohio State attraction, and you've got Jaxon Smith-Njigba, right? There's a wide receiver that is going to likely be available to you at number 9. You addressed a big need when you traded for DJ Moore earlier in March, and you now have a receiving core that has DJ Moore and Chase Claypool and Darnell Mooney. Well, Chase Claypool and Darnell Mooney are entering contract years. So my question is, would it be a wasted pick to go at number 9 and get Justin another weapon at receiver? That there's kind of 2 parts to this. That number 1, he has familiarity with and has talked up repeatedly over the last couple of years about how much he admires and appreciates Jaxon Smith-Njigba's skill set. Or would you just say, we've got receiver taken care of, let's figure something else out at number?
Well, I don't think receiver is completely taken care of. I don't think that they would say that, but I do think that their offensive and defensive line deficiencies are greater than their need at wide receiver at 9.
Agreed.
Like I think that's the direction that's why they would not go that direction. And I don't, even though Justin says that, and I know that Ryan Poles hears that, also based on the fact that, DJ Moore and Justin Fields had no connection and Justin didn't know that trade was going down. I don't think that Poles is picking his QB's brain before making these decisions he feels is best for the team. I don't think that that's happening. So in my brain, I would say They would, right. I don't think they'd go receiver at 9. I think they will draft a receiver, but I don't think they'll go at 9. And I think they have to address the issues up front on both sides of the ball. That has to be the first direction they go.
I'm with you on that. I do think it's an interesting topic to bring up just because of the way Justin has been vocally high on JSN, and because like Joe Burrow got Jamar Chase, he got his college teammate, and they had the instant chemistry. The Dolphins went out and got Jalen Waddle for Tua Tagovailoa, and those guys clicked and hit it off. And so there is something there. Now, at the same time, you want to, in Ryan's view, be looking out 2-3 years down the road, and you don't know if Justin Fields is your quarterback 2 or 3 years down the road. So to make a decision in the top 10, trying to appease a quarterback who may or may not be your starter long term, is definitely a risk. But it's an interesting conversation to have. And as you know, with the 4 or 5 weeks that we've got left until draft week, there's going to be a lot of interesting debates that are worth having. And I feel like that one, particularly with the Bears' presence this week at the Ohio State Pro Day, is one that's it's worth volleying about. I don't think they'll do it. I don't think they should do it. But I don't have a problem just kind of having that conversation, because it's probably one they should be having inside the walls at 1920 Football Drive.
Well, I don't know if I'm an authority on any of this, because last year I would have bet $100 they were going offensive line, just because that's the position Poles played. He knew that was the direction they needed to go, and he did not. So I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what's going to happen on draft night. Nobody does. I think it makes more sense what we're saying about going offense over defensive line, but you never know. And Poles is going to make the decision he makes with no regard for anybody else's feelings. So we'll see what happens there.
It's going to be fascinating. As we've mentioned previously, the owners' meetings are next week in Phoenix. That will give us an opportunity to hear a lot more from Ryan Poles, from Matt Eberflus, from George McCaskey, from Kevin Warren. Once again, an information-packed week coming next week in Arizona. I am so eager to get some warmth. The forecast says it's going to get to the 80s by the time the owners' meetings are ending. That's going to feel really good. It's been a little bit ugly in Chicago lately, and so I can't wait to be down there.
You deserve it, Dan.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the permission to go get a vacation. That's Dionne. I'm Dan. Thanks as always for joining us. Like, subscribe. We'll have more for you soon.